Hey, welcome everybody back to the Lockdown Sessions with my very special guest, Steve from Warrior Wrestling. Steve, you are in a very elite group all by yourself. Like Saturday Night Live has the Five Timers Club. This is your third time on the Lockdown Sessions. I mean, it's unprecedented.
Well, I am honored to be the only member of the Three Timers Club, and I want right of first refusal to challenge anyone if they tie me. If somebody ties me, I'm coming back.
Hey, that's all I wanted to hear right there. That's awesome. No, so seriously, welcome back. We have sponsors now, Steve, since the last time you've been on, and you know my sponsors very well. We are brought to you by the guys over in New York City, True Heel Heat. Those guys are doing a great job. They have their own podcast. They've got interview shows. SP3 is showing up everywhere. I don't know when the guy gets any chance to sleep, but if you're watching this and you enjoyed the Lockdown Sessions, make sure to check out the guys over at True Heel Heat. They're always I'm always learning stuff from them. Steve, it's October 28th. 2020 for those that are watching this in the future. Before we get started on anything, unfortunately we had a passing in the wrestling family this morning. The wild-eyed Southern boy Tracy Smothers passed away this morning, and he's had a pretty well documented fight with his illness. But any memories or thoughts watching Tracy Smothers, seeing Tracy Smothers?
So for me, I was not paying a lot of attention in the early to mid 90s. I was an 80s kid, Hulkamaniac, and then I really got out of wrestling from like 90 to 98. So my only Tracy Smothers thoughts are ECW at the end of the 90s. And it felt like ECW was the place where there were a lot of guys who could go there to get a new lot on life. And I think after his WWF run, he was doing just that. And so that's what I put him in the category, obviously not the same, legendary but the category of like a Terry Funk, like a guy who ended up in ECW and did a lot for young guys and at the end of the run. And so when I think Tracy Smothers, I think ECW.
Right. And I do too. That Tracy Smothers for me is one of those in the magazine guys. I'm up here in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, and a lot of the guys, like I did an interview with Nikita Koloff, and he was mainly, I didn't have cable, so he was one of my in the magazine guys. So yeah, our condolences and our best to the friends and family of Tracy Smothers, and in the wrestling world in a whole. You can't turn on social media right now as we speak without seeing a lot of tributes, and his contribution to wrestling will be remembered for a long time. So
I think CM Punk has a really good thread out right now of stories of working with Tracy Smothers early in the 2000s on the indie scene. And I think it's a really good testament to what a character he was and how much people looked up to him.
That's awesome. And CM Punk, of course, a Chicago native. Warrior Wrestling comes out of Chicago. There's my link up there. We've got a lot to talk about. I asked you if I could do this interview right after the last show of the Stadium Series. And as the time went by, I'm like, nah, I want to let that Stadium Series kind of stew and age like a fine wine that it is aging at. And I think now is kind of the perfect time to talk about it, because there has been other events that have happened. But we did talk about Friday Night Lights, unprecedented. You guys decide in the middle of everything, we're going to throw a show. We're going to do it as safe as we can. You guys did the social distancing at the stadium at Marion Catholic High School. You had the temperature checks, the face masks, the cone set up. You're wiping the ring down in between matches. And we talked about that when it happened, but now months beyond. Talk about the process that went into that, because you were dealing with, I don't know how exactly to be safe, but we're going to be as safe as we can be. What was, were your nerves on that night and the days after that show?
The first night, yes. For Friday Night Lights, my buddy Eric had pitched the idea of doing a show called Friday Night Lights on the football field a year ago, pre-COVID, in 2019, that we do a big Friday night show, summer of 19. For whatever reason, it didn't come together. And then the pandemic hit, and it was clear everybody was closing down. And we thought, all right, well, we're closing up shop for a while. And we all thought a while might mean March, April, and we're going to run Warrior 9 at the end of May. And then as April came and May came, it was very clear that this was going to be a much longer fight than we had all originally thought. And so as things started to get back to normal or approach better and better here in Chicago, as the numbers came down in June and the city opened back up, the governor of Illinois put out some guidance in late June that said we're going to start allowing for outdoor seated spectator events. And I read the governor's guidance because I'm the principal of the school. I read all the state stuff to see how it's going to affect us in school. And as I read these outdoor events, a light bulb went off where I went, hey, wait a second. We could do Eric's Friday Night Lights idea following these guidelines. And so we spent about a week in late June really going over everything to make sure that everything we were planning exactly met the guidelines as laid out. And so Friday Night Lights was very, very stressful. I mean, I talked to the people in line. I was all over the place trying to make sure everything was as safe as could be. And then we surveyed the people afterwards, and people felt very safe. And we put out those aerial shots in the show, and it went really, really well. And so we are insatiable people, our Warrior team, and we're like, well, it went well. Could we do it again? And honestly, we looked at the coming months, and we talked about how by the time we hit October, we're going to be screwed, not only weather-wise, but the pandemic, this thing's coming back. And once people are moving back indoors, everybody's saying once flu season ticks up, once cold season ticks up. So we realized, all right, we've got a very small window. We did Friday Night Lights on August 7th. Weather in Chicago is really unpredictable after October 1. It could be 95 on October 3rd, or it could snow on October 10th. You don't know. So we said, we've got this window from August 8 to September 30 to figure out, are we going to do more shows? We spent a couple days talking about it, and we said, let's go balls to the wall. We're going to do 3 shows in September, get them all in while it's safe outside, and then we pack it up and we're done for the winter. And that's what we did. And the anxiety level came down significantly for the stadium series after Friday Night Lights. I think people coming to Friday Night Lights, people feeling safe, other people seeing the pictures and the videos of the people that went and feeling safe there, that anxiety from Friday Night Lights did not carry over to the stadium series. The stadium series felt a lot more relaxed among the wrestlers, the crowd, everybody. Now, the anxiety was weather related. We had a brief downpour in the first show. We had freezing temperatures on the second show and an absolute windstorm on the third show. And so we dealt with those things. But as far as COVID and safety, I feel like once we did it once, everybody went, oh, okay, that's how we can do it safely. And we just followed that.
Now, I should have asked you some of this stuff off air, but can you squash a couple rumors for me or verify?
Sure.
Were you guys contacted at all by any of the bigger companies, the AEWs and stuff? Because I had, you read, hey, they looked at Tony Khan, looked at Warrior Wrestling and some other shows, and then kind of brought some of those concepts into his own.
Great question. We were not directly contacted. So it's not like Tony Khan gave me a call, although he could. If you're listening, Tony, please. But we have so many of our wrestlers, our workers who overlap with us and AEW that a lot of them brought what we were doing to the show. And I do know for a fact that a handful of the AEW brass watched the show because we got some feedback, not from Tony Khan himself, but from other people in AEW. So I know they were watching the show and that our talent went back and talked about the show with them. And so I know that Tony Khan then later said to Dave Meltzer that a lot of what we used is what they used to start bringing fans back to AEW. So they never called us, but they did give us props and cite what we were doing, which made us pretty happy.
That's great. Now, I remember leaving Friday Night Lights. I'm walking out as the fans are leaving in the groups that they came with. So you guys never just were safe at the beginning and thought, hey, this was a success. I saw Eric out by the exit, making sure people were exiting. People were asking him, are you going to do this again? And Eric says, as soon as the lights are out and everybody's out of here, I'm meeting with Steve and we're gonna talk. So even after that night, I mean, there was a buzz around that. The fans, when I go, I watch the fans. Try to watch everything, and the fans were absolutely. You said it. You guys were the biggest show in North America, the largest attended since the strike, and people missed their pro wrestling.
Yes.
So the fans were buzzing. So I know Eric was excited about trying to plan that. But then you come back with 3 shows, and I know the idea was we got to fit these in, like you said, before the weather hits. Now, what is it? It's you guys put together a tremendous show each time I seen you, and they're spaced out by a month. But now, are the pressures different when you're like, we got to book these 3 shows, and we got to book them one week after next? Was that any added pressure, or was it actually easier to go, hey, guys, can you make these 3 dates? Can you make 2 dates?
Combination of the two. So for
Okay.
making dates, it was easier because a lot of times, you know, I tell people planning a wrestling show is like the world's worst Sudoku puzzle. So if we're going to do a Warrior show on a given date, we have all of these dates, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. And literally I do this in an Excel spreadsheet for normal shows. I've got all the possible dates. And then I block out the ones that the school can't host. And then I go across the top, I've got Brian Cage, Lance Archer, Brian Pillman, Tessa Blanchard, the Rascals. What days can he do? What days can they do? What days can, and then I have to look at, all right, if it's this day, these 4 stars can do it. If it's this day, these guys can't, but then this guy can. And so you really have to sit down and go, what's the most important thing for making the show successful? And so for Warrior 1 through 8, we booked around the matches being able to come together. So we knew we wanted Ospreay for Warrior 7, and this is the most extreme example. Will Ospreay gave me in the summer of 2019, there's a single solitary day he could get to America and do a show. And I said, great, we're doing a show that day. And we built the show around Ospreay. It was Ospreay, Suzuki, and Angle. For these, it was not built around specific talent, but rather built around beating the clock of the weather and the season. So we said, we're going to do these 3 shows. And we confirmed with a lot of talents that they'd be available for one or all before making them official. But so we started there. And as I said, it made it easier for making it work with individual talents. So-and-so can't do the 12th, but they can do the 19th. Great. Your match will be on the 19th. It also made it more challenging, though, to come up with 3 cards 3 weeks in a row with basically no notice that we normally spend a quarter of a year doing. Usually we do 4 shows a year. So the show ends, we spend a couple of weeks soaking it all in, a couple of weeks formulating the next show, and then a couple of weeks, months then making it happen. Well, Friday Night Lights ended on August 7th. We talked for a couple of days. We worked really hard for like 4 days lining up talents, and then we just started running with the Stadium Series, and we only had 3.5 weeks to promote it. So it was the quickest turnaround ever between a show from Friday Night Lights to the first Stadium Series. We had 3 shows we had to fill. We had to make sure every show had enough to draw people. So we had spreading shows out and planning the shows, etc. So it was easier for fitting the dates in, but for promoting, for preparing, and for actually creating quality shows, it was definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. That's what I was wondering. It's got to be that double-edged sword. Your talent that you bring in, Brian Cage, Warrior Wrestling champion for quite a while. When I think about Warrior Wrestling, I think about Brian Cage. I think about Tessa Blanchard. I think about the Rascals. And now I started to think about Brian Pillman, Kylie Ray. These are guys and gals that I may not have known before I started really paying attention to Warrior Wrestling. Brian Pillman Jr., when I first saw him after the COVID and everything, I'm like, that guy has not taken a day off of the gym. Like, he looked better and packed on solid muscle since then. He wasn't in bad shape before when he won the belt originally in February. But talk about a guy who just took advantage of everything. And he said it, and I'll echo it. Warrior Wrestling, the championships right there, the most important titles in independent and in wrestling, especially during this time. How do you take that? That's a lot of praise for a promotion that I know, and it's well-deserved, Steve, so I'm not going to let you back out of it. But how does that feel?
It feels good, because we worked really hard for the last several years to try to build a place where people love the shows and where talent loves to work. I think those were equally important, and I think one enforces the other, right? If people weren't loving the shows, it wouldn't be a great place for talent to work, and if talent didn't love working there, they wouldn't put on the kind of shows that people would love. You know, we get most people's best matches. You know, when we have, whether they're a star who's on a big national brand who gets to let their hair down, so to speak, and have a little bit crazier of a match without a TV time limit, or whether it's a star on the rise who gets to showcase what they can do in front of, you know, people that haven't seen them before, we tend to get people's best efforts. And that makes me really, really happy, because that's what we want. We want a great show for the workers, for the fans. And when people say that the belt matters, that's important to us. Hopefully we've created this place and this space where wrestling is celebrated, and whoever we say is our top guy or top girl, that means something. And you know, it's been Brian Cage, Brian Pillman, and now Trey Miguel. And we hope that helps Trey in some way. And we know Trey being our guy helps us, just like with Brian and Brian. It was a mutually beneficial relationship every time we've had a champion. Same thing with Tessa Blanchard and now Kylie Ray. You know, it's really humbling and fulfilling to know that the talent values the promotion and the belt just as much as we value them.
Yeah, 100%. Talk about matchups that you knock it out of the park, you and Eric, every time I see a show. But when I looked at the Stadium Series, I get jaded like anybody else, and I look and I'm like, oh, okay. But you had a match set up that was going to be Alex Zane and Brian Cage, and in my wrestling head, I'm like, well, you know, I know what Cage is all about. I know what Zane's all about. Let's, you know, how's that going to work? I'm just curious as a guy in the business. Zane can't wrestle, but this young kid named Benjamin Carter, who the only time I had seen him before is when him, Zane, and Blake Christian had taken on the Rascals. He goes out, and him and Brian Cage have a freaking war out there that I'm still talking about a month and a half later. Hats off to those two. And now look at, you know, Cage is obviously AEW. It's been announced that Carter is off to WWE. Now here's where I'm going to ask the hard-hitting questions.
Mm.
Now, obviously that was one you had to make up, but are you and Eric kind of seeing this talent in your head and figuring this out? Are you just getting lucky? Is it bringing each other up, or what's the secret?
I think
you're killing it every time out there.
Well, thank you. I think it's all of the above. So I think it's a combination of a couple of things. And I think, you know, Eric and I have been best friends for 20 years, literally, oh gosh, more than 20 years now, which is crazy. We're old. But we're both teachers. You know, he is an administrator now in a junior high. I'm a teacher and administrator in high school. We've both been teachers. We ran an improv and sketch comedy group and then company together for a decade. We're always looking at talent, whether that's students, whether that's teachers in our buildings, whether that's in comedy. And you want to see something in somebody where you go, that we can, if we blow that up, that can be really, really special. And so honestly, I think for us, the way that these incredible matches come together is that to pat ourselves on the back a little bit, we're both really good at spotting talent or spotting the potential for talent. And that might be the teacher in both of us, that you see some kid where you're like, you know what, this could be a phenomenal writer if I help him or her do X, Y, and Z, or give him or her the chance. And it's the same thing with a wrestler. Ben Carter, we saw bits and pieces of, and I knew that there was the possibility that he could be amazing. So I talked to the Rascals about him when we were putting together the Rascals match for Friday Night Lights. And we said the Rascals versus the three hottest, most impressive guys out there, Zane, Christian, and Carter. And in that match, he impressed incredibly. And while we were looking to line up Brian Cage's two matches, he was going to do 9/12 and 9/26. 9/12 was supposed to be Zane. 9/26, we went through other things. We just never quite fit. And then we threw it to Cage and we said, well, what if we brought Carter in for that match? And Carter had just done his first match on AEW Dark. And Cage said, this kid was amazing. I just saw him do this taping last night. You're going to see the match in a week, but he's awesome. Yes, I'm in. Let's do it. And so it was set. It was going to be Zayn on the 12th and Carter on the 26th. Well, then Zayn got hurt. We called Carter. We said, what if we do it on the 12th? He moved to the 12th, and we were off to the races. And thank God we were, because then Carter had to quarantine a few weeks later. He never would have been able to have the match with Cage if we didn't have to move it up to the 12th. And so part of that is keeping the eye on talent and then bringing them in and seeing who they are, how they work, etc. The other thing is understanding how people mesh well together. And this is different wrestling promoters feel different ways about this, but Eric and I could talk to you for hours and hours about this. Every wrestler has a different style of a way that they wrestle in the ring. For me, I look at, and this is kind of nebulous to define, for me, it's all about how they move. So if I look at a guy or girl and I see that they move a certain way, in my mind, I know that this other person moves a certain way, and I kind of like watch those motions together and I go, that's going to be a perfect combination. And often it's complementary styles or very specifically the same style in a certain way. And Brian Cage particularly has his best matches against smaller opponents because it allows Cage to show off his strength and his unbelievable power moves while also showing off his speed, because Brian Cage is so fast. And I've had this conversation with Brian actually very recently. He called the other day and we were just talking about a variety of things. Oftentimes promotions book Brian Cage as this big unstoppable monster. But if you know Brian in his career, he started as a regular sized guy and he trained in lucha libre, and his style of wrestling is actually more akin to the Rascals than it is to the Big Show or Chris Masters or these big, jacked guys. So the key to Brian Cage is you find somebody who can wrestle the style of who Brian Cage is, not what Brian Cage's body shape is. And a guy like Ben Carter has the speed and the momentum and whatever. And so we just had this hunch that you put these two guys together and it's going to be lightning. And we got very, very lucky. And the other thing too that factors in is you need great people. Brian Cage wants to go out there and have an incredible match. Brian Cage is the opposite of phoning it in. When Brian Cage, who was number one contender a few months ago for AEW title, he's ranked number one in AEW right now. When he comes to our little indie, it's not a payday for him. He comes to us because he wants to have that Brian Cage match that he's been having throughout his career that he might not have the time to have on Dark right now or on Dynamite right now. Ben Carter wants to have a match that's going to put him on the map. So both of these guys walk in wanting to hit it out of the park. And that's where we just sit back and let them do it. So I apologize to be so wordy, but all of those things go into the process of putting together a match like that. And I would put that Brian Cage, Ben Carter match up against any other match in America in the last 2 months as far as excitement, crowd engagement, and people just going, wow, I saw something special.
Yeah, that I don't want to give anything away, but when we have the Best of Warrior DVD Volume 2, if that one's not on there, there's you know what? I'd be happy because then that means there's 10 other matches that are way better that somehow I missed. A couple other guys I want to touch on. Warhorse. Yes. He got national attention on AEW, but I first heard about him on Warrior. And so I want you to talk a little bit about Warhorse, but I also want to talk about two other guys that crowd in Chicago absolutely loved, and maybe it took a couple times, but you brought in Dan the Dad is over with that crowd. And at the last show with Rhino versus what an incredible guy, big man, the Beast Man, did he not win that crowd over?
Yes. I'll start with Beast Man and then Dan the Dad. So Beast Man, and again, it comes from referrals, right? We talk to wrestlers whose opinion we respect. Sam Adonis has known Beast Man for years. And he said several times, Steve, I got this guy. You're going to love him. You just got to meet him. And we brought him in for Friday Night Lights to be part of that big, crazy Stadium Stampede match. And he couldn't have been a nicer human being, couldn't have been a harder worker, and he got over huge in that match. Well, then we brought him back for the 6-man scramble in the Stadium Series. And he had the spot where he leapt off the top ropes and squished Facade. And then, Lance Archer had to quarantine, so we needed an opponent for Rhino. What about the Man Beast versus Beast Man? Who'd we be getting? And when that match happened at the third Stadium Series show, half the crowd was pulling not for the ECW, WWE, TNA star Rhino. They were pulling for Beast Man. And that just warmed my heart. They had a great match. And it really was a story of a guy who showed up, was incredibly polite and humble, worked hard, knew his character and his gimmick, went out there and did great. And you know what? He earned his spot back every time, to the point where whenever we come back, we know we're booking Beastman because we got to give the people what they want. And the same for Dan the Dad. You know, we had Dan on against Elena Black in an intergender character match that, again, we thought, knowing these characters, we know what Dan the Dad does, Elena Black, the Sorceress of Sin. This is basically conservative dad versus his rebellious daughter. And they're great character actors. So you know what? Let them do their thing. They got over huge. So then the next time Dan comes back, and guess what? And again, we had seen him as well in the Stadium Stampede and Friday Night Lights. So when Friday Night Lights, Elena Black, and then him in the 6-man scramble where he comes out with the football and he's throwing it around and playing catch. And the moment his music hit for the scramble match, the place went nuts. Give great people a chance, let them hit it out of the park, and then get out of their way. We're so happy to do that.
Yeah, outstanding. And I know for a fact, Beastman on that last match before Rhino, I know he was he's a guy that flies around. If you looked at him just standing in a room, you're like, okay, this is gonna be not even Jerry Blackwell. I'm just saying he's just gonna be a guy who just thugs around and just, dude, he's this close to being a high flyer.
Yes.
The dude puts his body on the line and everything, and he's amazing. When you guys announced that the replacement was gonna be Beastman for Rhino, I just looked on Twitter and it popped me. I was like, yes, because like you said, he could not be a nicer guy.
Yes.
I hate to blow his cover, but he couldn't be a nicer guy. So very well deserving.
Well, and even something as simple as, so getting a little inside baseball here, when he gets announced in the ring, he comes to the ring, he takes off his bear or whatever the hell it is he wears, and then he just splays across the bottom rope, biting the bottom rope. He gets that every second that he's through the curtain, he just embodies Beastman. And that's the one thing that when you look at him, you think, oh, he's just a big guy. He's not just a big guy, he's Beastman. There are big guys out there who are just big guys. He's Beastman. And that is the one thing I think every up-and-coming wrestler can learn from. Once you get comfortable with who you are and what your gimmick is, you just settle into it and you just live it. Dan the Dad is the same way. You mentioned Warhorse a moment ago. I've had that conversation with Jake Parnell, just like I have with Danny Adams, where both of whom I've seen wrestle long before they were Dan the Dad and Warhorse. And I've told both of them that the moment they became their current iteration, it's like their shoulders shrugged and they were just comfortable. Yes, this is who I am and what I'm meant to be. Because Jake Parnell was the Warhorse Jake Parnell. He was a fine wrestler. And then when he became Warhorse, he just came into his own. And it's the same thing. From the moment he walks through the curtain to the way he takes a bump to the way he walks through the crowd, there's a Warhorse way to do things, just like there's a Dan the Dad way and a Beastman way. And those guys are examples for every other wrestler about how you embody the gimmick.
100%. I'm going to back up a little bit because you did mention a few questions ago about, I come to Warrior Wrestling. I don't have my TV time limit. I don't have these restrictions that I may have being on a national promotion. One guy, and I actually apologized on Twitter. He didn't need an apology from me, but somebody who I'd seen wrestle on television in short matches and not really give him his proper due, but not really pay attention. At Friday Night Lights against Jake something, Joey Janela, I watched that match and I went, wait a minute. Now I've seen Joey wrestle before, but this was awesome. And then he came back and did it against Warhorse. And then he did it. I know he had Robert Anthony. Was it after? I think it was the Warhorse night. You gotta correct me.
They jumped him after the Warhorse match. They jumped him, and then he came back at the end for the no holds barred with Robert Anthony and Frank the Clown.
So I'm like, Joey Janela impressed me. Jake something impresses me at Warhorse. One other little thing I'm going to throw into this long-winded question is, I don't know if you and Eric, what kind of planning you did, but we were live blogging over in the UK at Wrestling Travel, and Danny, who's running the live blog, I'm trying to send him some pictures and stuff. He texts me and says, when Janela got jumped, that cloudburst opening up in the rain, he goes, dude, that looks so epic on Fight right now. He goes that it just, as they're attacking him, the skies open up. But the original point of my question is, Joey Janela got to kind of come out of that, whatever I had seen on TV. And I wrote on there, whatever I was doing, sleeping on Joey Janela, my apologies, because this guy can work. Then he goes out against Frank the Clown and Robert Anthony. And I wish I would have turned it into Barstool Sports, because I had a great shot of it. But he climbs the goalpost at the end and that great finish. But from Friday Night Lights until the last stadium show, my impression of Joey Janela is through the roof.
Yeah.
Thanks to Warrior Wrestling.
And those 3 matches, Jake Something, Warhorse, and Rob and Frank, were completely different. The Jake Something match was like a modern indie match, lots of cool stuff, smaller guy versus bigger guy. The Warhorse match was a great match with just really interesting character elements too, because that was the match where he carried Warhorse the whole 50 yards, planted him for the touchdown, then ran the way back, and then Warhorse runs in to beat the count, and Joey hits him with a super kick and rolls him up. Just incredible moments. And then the Rob and Frank match was one of the best brawls, hardcore matches I've ever seen. So Joey showed us in those 3 matches 3 completely different styles, and he aced every one of them. This guy is underappreciated in wrestling. And I know the entire Cornette wing of the fan base hates him. I think just because Cornette, I don't think they actually ever really look at his work. Just their guy hates him, so they hate him. Dude can work his ass off. Dude can lay out a match like nobody I've ever seen. And again, he gets whatever it is about wrestling, Joey Janela gets it.
You hit the nail on the head, because I will listen to things like Cornette, the podcast and stuff. And that's how I know, even at my advanced age, that I can't be taking people's word for anything. Because I think part of my stuff was seeing them on TV matches, and then I'll listen to the podcast, I'll hear Cornette rip on him. And then that's why when he goes up against Jake Something, I'm kind of watching in my seat, and all of a sudden I'm on the edge of my seat going, holy. And FanFest, Joey Janela could not be a nicer guy. So
Yes.
if you haven't met Joey Janela, he was very welcoming to us, not knowing wrestling travel, and answering a few questions for us. But whatever you need was that good. A consummate professional. So, yeah, anybody that's bagging on this guy just hasn't watched him.
Yeah, I mean, could not be. We always joke about this. Sometimes the larger than life characters are the sweetest, most kind and humble people. Lance Archer's another one. Sorry to spoil the Murder Hawk for everybody. He's the nicest guy in the world. But Joey Janela too. And Joey's very quiet. He is very, very soft spoken. And you see the bad boy on TV with the glasses and the hair and everything. And then, after a show, it's just like, hey, was that what you guys were expecting? Were you happy with what of course, Joe. Like, just such a nice guy. And because he's a fan. He grew up a fan. He gets it. He wants to do a good job. And he can lay out a match. Just the beats and the structure and the storytelling in his matches are fantastic. And again, I will put that final no-holds-barred match up against any brawl you've seen anywhere this year for spots. Yes, the spots were incredible, right? The swanton off the goalpost, the tombstone off the ring. But spots, storytelling, pacing, just the flow of the match couldn't be beat.
That's, from watching him against Jake Something on August 7th, when you guys were starting to build toward that match, when you announced the match at the end with Rob and Frank, I was like, man, if you would have announced that to me before I saw any of those matches, Joey Janela versus Robert Anthony in a no-holds-barred whatever match, I would have been like, all right, that'll be kind of cool to see live. That's me, and that's not the average fan, because most average fans were better on Joey Janela than me. But after seeing him work, and I'm going, I know what Rob's all about. Frank the Clown, I can't say enough about Frank the Clown. No matter how you feel about him at Warrior Wrestling, he brings the heat. But I was so excited about that match. And that's, if anybody watching this, our friends in the United Kingdom or from around the world, get yourself on Fight TV. Get yourself on High Spots, and you got to. The words that Steve and I are saying really don't do these matches justice. A couple other questions. I could talk to you all day, Steve, but I don't want to take all of your time. Talking about talent now, some of the actual love I have about going to see Warrior Wrestling live is before you go on Fight TV, you have some dark matches. I've been able to see guys like Garrison Creed, Travis Titan. You have to have, just as we talked off air, there's got to be a ton of people, younger talent, just climbing the walls to try to get on your show. But I mean, talk about that. That's got to be just as tough. You know, you plan a big card and everything for Fight TV, but these spots on your dark matches, that's got to be very difficult on you, because I know you, I know Eric, you don't want to disappoint people, but yet there's only so many spots available.
Yeah.
But you've picked some really good ones.
Yeah, we've gotten very lucky, and we've given opportunities to guys who have really crushed it. Like you said, Garrison Creed, Travis Titan, a lot of the guys from the freelance wrestling school or Chicago style wrestling. Crash Jackson from Ohio, who comes in with the Rascals. I think you're right. We don't want to disappoint people. That's probably the thesis of my life, is I'm constantly trying not to disappoint people. So you've got a lot of name wrestlers who are like, hey, I've got this young guy with me. He's great. I want you to get him on if you can. And then you've got all these other wrestlers that reach out that want to get on. And then you've got an audience that you feel we owe to that audience a great show. So sometimes you have a wrestler who wants to work a pre-show and they're just not there yet. Not that they're not going to be great, but they're not there yet. And as much as we want to give them an opportunity, we also owe that paying fan a phenomenal show. And so we've got to balance, how do we get a spot for the guys, you know, the main talent guys that we're trying to help out, the kids that they believe in? How do we get a spot for the up and coming kids that we're trying to get a foot in the door so they can get booked other places? Not just kids, but guys, girls. And how do we make sure that we can do that and also deliver a quality product to the audience? So we're trying to juggle a lot of things with those pre-show matches. And the other thing too is burnout, right? So it's not fair to, this is another thing people don't even think about. If we have a 9-match main card, it's not fair to matches 8 and 9 on the main card if we tack on 3 or 4 in the pre-show, because then they're really matches 12 and 13. And we're burning out the audience before we get to what are supposed to be our main event matches. Because usually an audience, even the most into it, enthusiastic audience in the world, only has so many hours of cheering in them. So you don't want to undercut your main people by putting so many things on the pre-show that you sap that energy from the audience. So we're constantly balancing a whole lot of things, trying to keep a lot of balls in the air and not drop them. We've gotten very lucky because we've put some great people in positions to succeed, like a Garrison Creed, like Crash Jackson, like Travis Titan. And for us, that also gives us a sense of who might come back, in the future, right? So Travis Titan crushed it on a pre-show match on the 12th, and then he was in the main show on the 26th. So it gives us a chance to see who might be next.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing, I do have a couple more questions, but I'm sneaking one more in because I think it's important. It's important to me, and I know this is important to you. I want to give you just a few minutes of time. Please talk to me about the importance of Zachary Wentz, Desmond Xavier, pardon my running over, and Trey Miguel, the Rascals. I know the crowd loves them, and I know that even though they were on TV and not getting in the spotlight, they've been in the spotlight for Warrior. They've been really good for you guys.
Yes, they are. I think 3 of the best pound for pound wrestlers on the planet Earth, as far as ability, match quality, work ethic, being great humans. We first met them at Warrior 4 in the spring of 19. Eric and I were backstage at Impact Wrestling's Homecoming, January 5th, 2019, whenever Cage challenged Johnny Impact for the title. And we were actually talking to Cage backstage about what could be some great matches for him. And he goes, hey, let me pitch you an idea. Me in a 4-way against all 3 of the Rascals. And we knew them. We'd seen them at AAW. We'd seen them on Impact. Like, we knew they were good. But at that point, we weren't 100% in as far as like, yes, they're amazing. And so we talked through with Cage. We watched a lot of their stuff. We're like, all right, that could be a lot of fun. So that was the semi-main on Warrior 4. And they were Awesome. Absolutely awesome. We tried to have him back on Warrior 5. There were some scheduling issues. And then when it came time for Warrior 7 with Ospreay, that was the dream match. It was the Chaos versus the Rascals. And it was such a great match. We loved working with those guys. We thought, well, what do we do next? Well, a couple weeks later, a week later, Shima reaches out to me. And he goes, hey, myself, T-Hawk, and Lindemann are going to be in North America for a month. We're going to be based out of the States doing indie dates. Are you guys going to run a show? And my light bulb went, wait a second. Shima, T-Hawk, and Lindemann versus the Rascals. So they stole Warrior 8. And then when it came time for Friday Night Lights, well, of course we need the Rascals. And so they had that great match for Friday Night Lights. And then we were only going to do one more Rascals match. They were only going to do 9/12. And then as it got closer, things were shifting what some of the other matches were going to be. And then we said, well, let's do them versus each other for 9/19. And then the winner gets a title shot. And then Trey won that. And then it's Trey versus Pillman. And then honestly, all of these things just kind of came together. This was not the master plan earlier in the outdoor shows, but it was right to pull the trigger on Trey winning the title against Pillman and Cage. And I'll share a quick Rascal story. Dez couldn't be with us that weekend, but Zach was there earlier in the night with the match with Blake Christian. Zach did not know the finish of the main event. And I was standing on the stage after Trey won. And Zach Wentz ran up to me, grabbed me by the arm, and he said, can I go out there? I said, yes, go. And he just shot like a dart up the 50-yard line and just tackled Trey, tears in his eyes. And that was one of those moments where, God forbid something happens, we can never do another wrestling show ever. I can look back on a moment like that and go, I'm just so happy we were able to give the platform to those guys to do that. And I'm so happy we were able to give that to the audience. I'm really happy we were able to set the table and let those guys bring what they do to the table. Cannot say enough good stuff about the Rascals.
And one other person who did not know the finish of that match, we were lucky to bring her in from Canada. Miss Alicia Etude was very, very happy. We were lucky to get her into the country. She had to quarantine on her way back into Canada, but she was able to stay for 2 shows. And one of my last things when, hey, have a safe trip there, she was in tears and going, hey, I had no idea that he never said anything to me. And she was so excited, goosebumping. I mean, that was a great moment for us. We're not just sponsors with Alicia. I consider her a friend and everybody in that locker room a friend, but that was a cool moment.
Yeah. I love the fact that it was a surprise for her. And for those who maybe listening might not know, she and Trey are an item. It was a surprise for Alicia, a surprise for Zach, and a big surprise for our fans. And we knew, without getting too deep into the weeds of decision-making and creative and whatnot, when Cage's second attempt at the match with Zayn fell through because Zayn had to quarantine, we said Cage is getting to get his rematch. So it's the former champ, and the challenger. The stars just aligned too perfectly to not have a change that night. What a way to end the Stadium Series. What a way to send the fans home happy. What a way to have, at that time, all 3 of our champions in the ring together. The first one, the current one, the new one. It all added up too perfectly to not pull the trigger.
Yeah, like I said, I don't do anything. I go sit in the crowd, try to take some pictures and stuff, and that one popped me. I was like, no way. There's no way. I mean, it's all, well, to me, I love all 3 guys. So I was always going to be happy and disappointed because I'm like, oh, man, Pillman's freaking carrying the load now. Cage did it before, but to go on Trey, and then hindsight is, yeah, that was perfect. That was awesome. Controversial subject possibly right here.
Ooh.
Ready? And maybe you've answered this on other stuff, Steven. I haven't seen it, but are we ever going to get a Warrior Wrestling Tag Team Championship?
Great question. It's always in discussion. And prior to the outdoor shows, I would have said it would be unlikely just because we only run 4 times a year, although we were kicking around the idea of a tag team tournament. Because we have so many great tag teams that we work with now, I think it's a real possibility. And it will really depend on what the world looks like when we open back up, or how we open back up, or can that happen safely and slowly, etc. But it is very possible. There belts are not constructed. It's not a definite, but I would put it at more than 50-50 odds. You will see some Warrior Wrestling tag titles.
I think with what you do with your regular shows, I know that some of the bigger organizations might not be going with too much tag team. I think you guys could be almost a throwback and bring it back. So that's not as controversial as I thought, which is great. But the other thing I wanted to say, you guys set the precedent with, and I don't want to give you all the credit in the world like you're the CDC, because we still don't know how the virus works or anything, but you went above and beyond for safety. I went on record saying, I sure hope in June when we were able to run in Wisconsin, I don't want some promotion ruining it for everybody. Now there was a in October, and you just pass on any of these questions, Steve.
Sure.
If you're like, no comment, let's just not touch this. I understand. Shows that were run, and now coming out of these shows, we have some people catching the virus. Now that could be, I'm not going to crap on anybody because it could be the weather, the time of year, all kinds of stuff. I did some interviews where people said they were not temperature checked. Maybe some of the precautions weren't in place. Some of the wrestlers went on and said, hey, it was perfect. It was this and that. But how does that, you have to keep a close eye on that. Even though you guys are done and wrapped up, it's gotta, because it sucked for me, just as a fan wanting wrestling to kind of go on, that goes, oh man, everything was going so good with Warrior. And now this happened in October, and there seemed to be a lot of storylines out of that with the corona virus. I mean, does that, to you, you guys took it very seriously and took every precaution? Does it a little bit disappointing when you hear that, you know what, we got some problems coming out of some other ones? It kind of, because it hits us all no matter what promotion we're in.
Yeah, I think, I don't know that there's anything that they could have done differently besides not do it, because I think they just had a whole lot of headwinds that they were going into that we didn't have. Number one, cases were on the rise. Number two, the way the collective is structured, it's so many different companies and so many guys from so many different places, all of which have different quarantine levels, etc. Number three, it was indoors, so we don't know what effect that had. Number four, it was in Indiana. And so, we're right here by the border of Indiana, although we're Illinois. Indiana hadn't been doing anything to keep anybody safe for months. Indiana was one of those states where it's like, what pandemic? So I think all of those things added up and made it far more likely for there to be outbreaks from Collective Weekend than from a Warrior show. And I don't think it's reflective necessarily on whether or not, they temp checked or et cetera. I think it's more reflective on, there's a whole lot of boxes there that for us, if those boxes were all unchecked, we would have been like, not worth it. We're not going to do a show. You know what I mean? And it's not a knock on GCW because they've done very safe outdoor shows prior to that in Indianapolis and in New Jersey. So I think had I been looking at all of those boxes, cases ticking up, people from all over, indoors, etc., I just wouldn't have pulled the trigger on doing a show. I'm not saying that they made a giant mistake by doing it. They could have done it and nobody got sick, right? And so, I don't think it's really anybody's fault particularly. It's unfortunate in general. I think a big part of it too comes down to the wrestlers and how safe some of the wrestlers are being, right? And we know this from our own locker room. Some wrestlers were super safe, spread out, masks all the time. Other wrestlers, like we had to talk to them, be like, hey, look, like I know you think you are invincible, but you're not. Please be safer. And we had to have some of those awkward conversations with wrestlers in our locker room. I think honestly we got very lucky striking when we did. And Eric's the one who called this in June. Eric said, come October, the virus is going to be back and we're all going back to lockdowns. And it's true, and I don't foresee any fans at indie wrestling. I just saw earlier, maybe an hour or two ago, AAW just said here in Chicago, they were doing 50 fans at Bourbon Street. Well, all the restrictions just changed in the city in suburban Chicago now. They can't do the fans at Bourbon Street. They're going to do the show, but they're going to do it wrestlers, no fans. I don't see fans in wrestling shows for the next 6 months. I honestly don't. And I think that's the bigger story, is that we struck while the iron was hot outdoors when it was getting better. Now the country's just falling off the cliff, unfortunately.
One of the other, talk about a promotion that I know is close with you, looked at Warrior Wrestling, came up. Kyle Hessler, who ran the Independent Wrestling Expo down in Dallas, and actually then came back up and made it for 2 stadium shows helping out. It's gotta mean a lot to you, and it meant a lot to me. Not really knowing Kyle, but watching you guys kind of embrace Kyle and answer questions and stuff and help out. And that's you guys. And this is not so much of a question, I guess, Stevie, you can respond to it, but the leadership that you guys shown in the independent wrestling world, whether you felt like it was or not, when you're talking with a guy like Kyle who was able to go, Steve, I want to do this. How would I do this? And taking pointers. I mean, my hat's off to you and Eric.
Thank you
for all of that. So
I think that comes from a place of we are trying to run it the way that we would love other things to be run, you know? And so we actually have this like a standing policy that's called, yeah, come on in, which is, you know, Rob Malinowski reached out to us before Warrior One, and he said, hey, I make wedding videos. I've always wanted to do videos for wrestling. Can I do a documentary on this show you're doing? Yeah, come on in, you know? Basil Mahmood reached out to us the first one. I take photos. Can I take? Yeah, come on in. Like that's how it should be, right? Like if you have a talent or you have a skill or you want to come on in, you know, bring what you can to the table. Maybe you can learn from us. We can learn from you. We really appreciated Kyle made our transportation so much easier for the Warrior shows. He would fly in and wrangle our wrestlers and bring them from O'Hare or Midway or wherever he might be and just help us with transportation. He got to learn by talking to the wrestlers and getting to know them for his own shows, which were upcoming. We got help because we had somebody else we could trust who's organized to take care of that stuff. It's mutually beneficial for everybody. And so I really feel like if more people had the attitude of, yeah, come on in, wrestling would be even better.
I agree. And I think that's why my hat's off, because I've seen too many, hey, I'm running 2 hours down the road. You're against me. No, we're all in the same family, the same business. So yeah, my hats are off. I don't have a really good final question thought up, because I feel like I've asked you everything I've kind of wanted to ask. In my mind, this interview was going to be more going over, hey, what was your favorite match? Talking about, but just being able to get inside your head a little bit about planning the shows, and just the questions that we asked were very deep, you know. And I feel like if we got into talking about the wrestlers and the wrestling, we're going to have some of the same answers. But I know if we go into a plunge for 6 months, I'm going to be excited about that first time when it's springtime, 70 plus degrees, and we're back at the stadium, hopefully doing another show. But in the meantime, I always use the end to plug everything we got. So if you can go over, if everybody's going to be sitting home over the winter, where can we? I know you guys got great T-shirts for sale. I know you guys got all kinds of stuff. So plug your socials. I know if you have a wrestling fan in your family and Christmas is coming up, order the bundle wherever you can. Order the DVDs. I know you have some DVDs out there. I'm not going to plug it. I'm going to let you. Where can the fans,
You got it.
for 6 months, we're in a dark hole, what can we do to pay attention here?
Well, number one, for apparel, Pro Wrestling Tees, that they house all of our stuff that you can order directly for yourself. So we've got a bunch of designs up there, including silhouettes of Cage and Pillman and Kylie and Tessa. And so the great We Are Warrior Wrestling shirt. So, excuse me, head to prowrestlingtees.com. For DVDs and to watch High Spots, you can sign up for High Spots and watch everything there and order DVDs of all the show. That's the place to go, especially like you said, if you've got a wrestling fan in the family, get Friday Night Lights, get the Stadium Series bundle on DVD. It's pretty cool. Our socials, at Warrior Wrestling, no vowels in wrestling, so WRSTLNG. That's Instagram and Twitter. We are experimenting with the idea of releasing some of our content throughout the years via YouTube or some other media throughout the winter, because as we said, we're not going to be making anything new. So we might be releasing small chunks of things that we've done. So stay tuned for that. If that happens, we will tell the world, and so that way people can enjoy Warrior Wrestling out on the interwebs while we're all hunkered down in our homes. But in the meantime, everybody stay safe. I mean, there's nothing that I want to do more than plan a wrestling show. So if that means whoever's listening, wear your damn mask, stay inside, don't breathe on people. Let's get through this as quick as we possibly can. And then the moment it's safe to do so, let's join back together and have a big show.
Absolutely. And I don't want to put any pressure on you, but if you and Eric can plan 3 shows in just a shade over 4 weeks, I can't wait to see what you guys will come back with 6 months.
We're going to figure out how to put a man on the moon, Justin.
I figured you guys would be, there's water there now. Apparently you guys can get there. So Steve, always a pleasure. Don't think that you're off the hook by doing 3 of these. You know, I want you to have you back for number 4, but we'll wait a while. So I thank you very much for your time, sir.
Sounds good. Good to see you, my friend.
You too, buddy.